Welcome back to the One Line Away podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Tyler Weber.
And this is Cassie Weber. And in today's episode, we are going to be talking about isolation. Your story deserves to be seen, even if it's still unfolding. That is something that has driven so much of why we're doing this now. Isolation feels inevitable because obviously if this whole topic went your way, none of us would be here. As weird as that sounds, it's like, no, quite literally, there's a point that when you enter into this world, you're already put into a box or a corner that isn't, arguably isn't one that you want to be in. And isolation has affected so much of our then when it started and into today still. I feel like we're constantly dealing with that and also trying to find tools on how to survive it, or at least not let it get so bad.
Or take you over.
Yeah.
That's the biggest one, is letting it take you over. Because it can come in and creep in and consume you for the rest of the day, the rest of the week, the rest of the month. But you have to be able to fight that and be like, look, you're going to have this bad moment. Whether that is go to the bathroom, take a break, go somewhere, go on a walk, like you have to get it and not let it take you over. And that's one thing I think we both can see ourselves where we get down that path where we're like, oh gosh,
yeah,
we're going through it. And then we're both really good at bouncing back, whether that is like leaving what we're at or doing something. But
definitely when you feel like no one gets or understands what you've been through unless they've been through it in some capacity, it's just this like separation that you can't help. Like you can't help it. And so it's like, how do you combat that reality? Because it's very true. But on the other side of it, some people may not see it that way. It's like there's this invisibility that is veiled over you. You are very much so loud in your own journey, but everything outside and around you is celebrated so much bigger. I think something that's been really hurtful when it comes to isolation that you didn't mean to happen, something that's been said to us multiple times in different variations has been something along the lines of like, oh, you've changed. Or I don't know this version of you anymore. And it's things like that are so distasteful because there's things that people go through in their journey on infertility or loss, grieving, all of that forces you to feel so small.
Or on an island.
Yeah.
Like you think when you're going through it and you just feel like you have them in yourself, you put yourself on that island. But for someone to validate and put you on an island in their perspective, it's like worse. Right? It's like, it double isolates you.
Yeah. Well, that's just it. And it can make things feel so much more like you pull back even more. Whether it's social or emotional, whatever it is. I still am figuring that out, and we're still working through that. And lately I've been in a period of time where I have been isolating, and it's like, I don't think people have really seen that. And it just goes to show that there's so many inconsistencies when it comes to a journey like this. And it just is so much push and pull and push and pull. And for me, there's things that you just don't expect, or you don't realize you can't combat, or you don't realize will affect you in ways that it does until it happens. And there's just a little bit of unhealthy habits that creep up again. And you just hope that you can shake yourself out of it in a healthier way. But it just sucks. Like this whole thing just is royally suckish in all ways. I can't even put it in a better way, but isolation is when you go down like the mental part of it too, it's a very scary red flag. It's a flag that gets thrown that can spiral into things that we've talked about already. But when no one's really looking or really seeing you, whether you've decided to share your journey or not, isolation should be something that we all are aware of, behaviors that change depending on how you know someone. If someone's a certain way 90% of the time, whatever the percent that you want to make it, and then all of a sudden things are just crashing, there's usually something going on, right? That's just life. But it's how you see people in that fault or that flaw, right? Like, it's just how you see them and just being a good human. Because if we've learned anything, and we'll say it again and again and over again, is like, there's some things that you just aren't meant to deal with alone. Even if you feel like you're doing it okay alone, it doesn't mean that you're doing what we're doing. It means that you have maybe someone or some family or some group that can hold that space for you when you need that. And that's a really big tool to seek if you are still in that realm, and if this podcast is your place that we can hold space for you and all of these things that you're walking through, that's an honor, 100%. I think something really interesting to bring up is, especially when you're in between like waiting periods, whether that's with natural conception or fertility treatment conception, however you look at it, there's just times of loneliness where you feel like you're waiting for the pen to drop, or you're diverting to different things to try to get through this waiting period that you're always in. And I think that that's a part of isolation that's sometimes like a narrow way to look at it, but like every single month you're dealing with something as far as isolation is considered. There's always something, even if it's small, there's always a bit of natural isolation that happens, whether it's personal or as a couple, things around you.
Yeah, trying to figure out what's going on. Yeah. I feel like that's when we first started the isolation, and then not talking to anyone or not trying to come up with ways to get out of it, because you don't really notice you're in isolation until you're in it.
And empty.
Yeah, you're in it, you're empty, and you've been going through it for a while. Like, I remember I didn't really feel like I was in isolation until I was like, what is this? I finally asked myself, but that was all after like a couple months. Like it took me a bit to realize what isolation was. And then now I can sense it coming, where I'll have like my moments, and it's like, oh, okay, I need to shift. But it does come out of nowhere, and it does happen quick, and it does take you a little while to realize that's what this is.
Yeah. I know when things were, I'd always go back, and I hate that we have this to go back on, but it feels like it's inevitable, and it was inevitable. But when I think about in like our household and the isolation that we were experiencing individually that then affected us as a couple, that was also a period of time that was just really sad to look back at. And I still think that there's a bit of that we still deal with. Just, again, it's like this limbo stage of everything that we do forward from this point is a huge risk in so many different ways. And it's scary to like talk about it and vocalize it and continue to bring up past traumas and past things like what we're talking about, and still feel like, we're hitting nothing. Like, we're not getting anywhere. There's so much like stagnancy, right? When you're just like, oh, like we have to get over that. Or, oh, like you got to get past it. Or, whatever the conversations that we have all the time, conclude to. We grieved at different times, and we didn't always know how to talk to each other. Yeah. Which isolates. And I just don't think, I think this this whole topic about isolation, it's an inevitable thing that happens whether you see it or don't, or no matter if you see it right away or much later. I do feel like a part of us will feel some sense of isolation in our lives until something changes in our life.
Well, even with us, like we've been together for so long that during those isolation moments when I want to talk or you're ready for another step and I'm not, feelings are going to get hurt.
Yeah.
And even though we witnessed it multiple times where you were ready for the next step and I wasn't. And I was just, and like me saying no meant you were crushed. But it's like, dude, you know, I couldn't mentally and everything. We weren't on the same page with at that moment. But when you're going through it and you're isolated, like sometimes saying no and hurting those feelings and then talking about it later is the best.
Yeah.
Because it's like a double-edged sword. If we went along with what you wanted, I would have been crushed. Then who knows where we would be like right now.
Yeah, because you just like, I don't even know how to word it.
It's tough though. It's true and tough.
Yeah. Yeah, we're at a point in our life, and Tyler's made this very loud internally, like at home, but privately, is like any step we make next, we're not doing it unless we are in a position physically and emotionally to be able to handle it with as much grace as we can.
With outside noise.
Yeah.
With like all of our other factors that are playing in. If there's something that's off balance and any other factor outside of like this podcast and stuff, we got to fix that first.
Yeah. And there's things in our lives that are out of balance as of right now, that it's scary to look at decisions that have to be made again in order to put that in motion.
Well, we want to just jump right back into it.
Yeah.
But, right, because whether or not we're feeling like the isolation of, you know, we haven't done anything for so long, like we need to do something.
Yeah.
And I think we're both kind of on the same page of it, but there's just things that we've talked out that everything needs to, like, for lack of a better term, our ducks need to be in a row before we go gung-ho on this.
Yeah. When you're dealing with this topic, a really good way to work through it is when you can talk to, like for me, it's talking to Tyler about things that are maybe holding us back from trying something next or doing what we want to next. And really like talking through it will unveil that feeling where you just feel so tiny and like unseen, unheard. And we've been really practicing those conversations recently. And it's maybe a little bit still fear-based, but I think at the end of the day, there's been so much time where now you feel like, okay, are we allowing time to take over again because we're so scared to take risks, or we're so scared of the things that we've been through before happening again. And so it's been really interesting when I've felt like I have fallen recently into an isolation spell, if you will. And we've had to talk through some really hard things and hard decisions that ultimately affect the hope that, you know, all that matters in our life right now is having a family. And sometimes you have to make really difficult things or set other things aside or take risks that will set you up for more hope in what you hope is to come. So yeah, I think that that's a really good tool is with you and I, we've been able to practice conversations rather than me spiraling on my own and, I've already, I noticed these things of like not responding as quickly to people, or kind of like checking out or saying no to things more. Like those things have been very prevalent. And I think working through that recently quickly has been really helpful. I think that this whole isolation thing also affects your circle of whether it's friendships or community or whoever. And it's almost like when you do take a step back, or when you do hide underneath the table, for lack of a better way to put it, is when people are like, okay, like I'm just going to stop reaching out, or okay, like those things have definitely been very real and very loud in our lives. And it's been things that have been like, you can find some faults in yourself. But there's things where at the end of the day, it's like, when someone takes a moment to think about how much we haven't gotten that they've gotten in the past 4 years, and how that could maybe affect them if they were still in the same boat, I think that changes your tone when you look at someone going, oh, well, she hasn't reached out to me about the kids, or she hasn't come around for a month, or whatever it is. It's like, again, it's the putting yourself in their shoes thing, and it being pretty simple when it comes to just checking in with someone. I think when someone's dealing with grief and loss and just hardship, sometimes it takes to send a heart emoji, or putting it in your calendar every 2 weeks to check in with someone. There's things like that. And there's, in life, like so much isolation occurs because life is really hard. But I think like the whole motto, or I guess what feels so loud for me is like the feeling so small thing with this topic. Like it makes you feel so small and so invisible. At the end of the day, the feeling of isolation and feeling that there's no place for you in the in-between that we love to talk about, that we're in, that's pretty sarcastic too, because it's not it's not love in my terms, but that can revolve around, your space of faith or family things, friendship gatherings, traditions, things that you feel like you'll never get to be a part of. And when this really sets in, like when you really sit in, when things especially for us in the past 4 years, with like all the milestones around us that have been met, or the milestones that have been experienced or celebrated, there is no better way to celebrate someone who's going through infertility than to see them and to honor them by validating them. And be loud about that. If that's you're doing the check-ins, you're like, for us, the people that have showed up for our merch drop, and they share our episodes and they listen to every episode, whether they're at all in this realm of life or not, like that's what's loud.
So before we close out today's episode, there's just one thing that we want to leave you guys with. You are not too much. You are not forgotten. Just because no one sees the weight you're carrying doesn't mean it isn't real.
Boom. Mic drop. But don't drop these because these are nice.
So thanks for tuning in, guys. We will see you next week.
Thanks, guys.